All right, before we get started, let me walk you around RED, just to give a little explanation of what I'm going to be doing here. Over here, we have a list of all the different types of objects we can build up in our data warehouse. This is the object panel, the working panel, where I'm going to be creating things. This is my browser, where I can look at either my data warehouse or my source systems, and then any messages or results I get would be down here. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a dimension out of my source system. I've got several connections here. A source system could be ODBC. In this case, I'm using a Northwind database. It's a sample database from Microsoft. I'll just browse this very quickly. And you can see that I've got all sorts of tables and views here. This is a SQL Server database that's running on my laptop, and I'm going to be creating my data warehouse up in Snowflake. So let's get data out of SQL Server, and let's get it up into Snowflake. I set my context to load tables. So here's my working panel. I drag over customers. We're going to create a dimension out of this table. And WhereScape takes care of a couple standard things: naming conventions, converting them to uppercase. We've got configurable prefixes and suffixes, and data type mappings, typecasting. I don't have to worry about that. That's being taken care of by WhereScape. I've got some information here I can type in, but I'll just accept all the defaults. I'll generate the update script. That's going to copy data from SQL Server up into Snowflake. That's done. And now what I'll do is I will just create the table, write the DDL that's going to create a table up in Snowflake that mimics my table that's in SQL Server, and then it's going to execute the script that we created that's going to get data out of SQL Server and get it up into Snowflake. And you can see that WhereScape is wide open. We show you everything we're doing. This is the DDL that's creating the table. We're actually going and grabbing the extended attributes from SQL Server and incorporating that into our data warehouse. And if I do best practices and go here and say display data, I've now got a brand new table that's up in Snowflake that's got all the data that was in SQL Server. So now I need to create a stage table that's going to have any transforms I need to do. And once we get the stage table done, then we'll create a dimension out of that. So to create a stage table, I can browse my data warehouse because all the data is now up in Snowflake. Here's my data warehouse. Here's my new load table. Set my context to stage tables. Drag my load table over. If I need to add any transforms, I can do that. Transforms can literally be any valid SQL expression. I'll rebuild my update script, and then I will create the DDL for creating my stage table. I'll tell it what the business key is. Just that'll save me a little work downstream. I'll click OK. WhereScape is now writing the DDL to create the stage table, and it's executing a script that's going to copy the data from the load table into the stage table. Again, if I had any transforms there, those transforms would take place as well, denormalization, things of that sort. And here is the data in my stage table. All right, the last thing I want to do is actually create the dimension. So to set my context to dimensions, refresh my data warehouse. Here's my stage table I created. Grab that. I will following good standards. I'll make it singular, dim customer, rather than dim customers. I will then decide what kind of dimension do I want. Type 1, Type 2, Type 3, Type 6. I'll do a Type 2. They're fun because a lot of times they're difficult to implement, and this will let you see how easy it is. While I'm here, I can type in some information that will show up in the documentation. In addition to having comments on the individual columns, we can add comments here as appropriate. So I will say the grain is 1 customer per row. And if I wanted to add more there, I could. Just like the other ones, I will build my script for populating my dimension. I'll create it and load it. Because this is a type 2 dimension, I've got to tell it what columns I want to track. I don't have to track all of them, but I'll just select a few. That way, if those values change, we'll actually keep a historic record of what values were active during what time periods. And here we go. We've got our dimension created. I've got my ghost record in case we can't attach the fact table to the dimension, to this dimension, to the customer ID. We've got a surrogate key, and then over here we've got our metadata columns describing when these values for this customer were active, whether this is the most current value or not. Now that I've got that done, I'll do it one more time. I'll do it for products. So again, I can browse my connection to my source system. There's all the tables and views in my source system. This could be REST APIs, could be JSON files. I create a load table. In this case, I'm going to create a load table based on products. I can save that, create the update script, create the table, run the update script, or the load script, I should say, that's going to populate products. from my source system. And just like that, I've now got a table created up in Snowflake, and I've got all the data populated, the typecasting done, data conversions done, everything else. As I did before, I'll create a stage table, I'll browse my data warehouse, I'll refresh that. I've now got a load table for products. I'll create a stage table for that. As I said, transforms can be any valid SQL expression. I can add calculated columns. I can split things apart. I can essentially do anything, add any functions, subqueries. I'll make product ID my business key. And OK. And a stage table like that should get created. Lastly, what I'll do is set my context to dimensions. I'll update my browser for my data warehouse. Here is my stage products. Again, following good conventions, I will name it in the form of the singular. I'll just make this a type 1 dimension. So we have one record per business key. Again, building the update procedure on how we load this dimension from the stage table. There's nothing really to change here, so I'll just click OK. And just like that, besides having a customer dimension, we now have a product dimension as well. All right, now that we've got it in 2 dimensions, let's create a fact table and then join them all together. So the fact table, I'm going to browse my source system. I'm going to create a fact table based on orders, fact orders and order details. So my tables I'm going to bring in are orders in order details. Set my context to load tables. We'll bring in the orders first. Just drag that. Again, the naming conventions, the typecasting is all handled for me. I'll generate the update script, or the load script I should say, that's going to populate this table from SQL Server into Snowflake. Again, it'll write the DDL to create the table, and in a matter of a few seconds we should have all that data up in Snowflake, and there it is. All right, change my context back to load table. We'll grab the order details as well. I'll just drag that over, and just like we did before, create the load script. Everything that WhereScape does is essentially SQL Server embedded in Python. All the work we're doing once we get data into Snowflake, the transforms, the data migration, everything else is all being driven by the Snowflake engine itself. And then again, we support many, many different targets. It could be Snowflake, could be Databricks, could be another variety of things. All right, here's our data for orders and order details. Now we'll join those in a stage table and add the dimensions. All right, I've got my header details loaded in my load tables, load orders, load order details. Let's go ahead and create a stage table where we're going to join those two together, and then we will add our dimensions to that as well in preparation for creating a fact table. So I set my context to stage tables. I'll browse my data warehouse. Once we get stuff loaded into Snowflake or whatever the target is, everything after that takes place within the database itself. So we're going to start with the load orders. That's going to create a stage orders table. I'll go ahead and add that. I don't want to rebuild yet because I'm not done creating the structure of the stage table. So I'll just click cancel for now. Because what I want to do is I want to add order line on here under order ID. I'll probably want product ID to know what product we're shipping. So I'll add that. Oh, let's add that under employee ID. And then the details in the fact table, what the unit price is, how much was ordered, and any discount that was applicable. I can add more transforms here. I can add calculated columns and do all that. Maybe I want to multiply unit price and quantity to get a total value of each line. But for now, let's leave it as it is. Once I've got this done, I can go here and recreate my update script. I need to tell it what the business key is. So in case it's a composite ID of order and order line. And then the next step is, since I'm joining a parent-child relationship, I need to tell it how to join those two. So we're starting with load orders as the driving table. I'll add a join to the details, and it's simply joining order ID from the load to order ID on the load details. That's all I need to do. Here's my where clause. For my join clause of my select statement when it is populating the stage table, I'll click OK. It's done. I haven't created the table yet, so I need to do that. Once we get the table created, I can run my update script. And now when I look at it and look at the data, I can see that I've got header information, I've got detail information, I've got a fully denormalized table on here. All right, one more step to do. I'm going to add the dimensions to the stage table, and then we'll create the fact table. So if I look at the columns here, these are all the columns on my stage table. Adding a dimension is very, very easy. It's similar to denormalization to some extent, but there's more automation that takes place. So dim customers, let's add that. If I drag this whole table, whole dimension over, WhereScape is smart enough to understand I'm joining a dimension. It understands what the business key is on the dimension. It sees that there is a customer ID, the same name here, so it's going to assume that's how they're joined. If this customer ID didn't exist or had a different name, I could manually tell it how to join from the stage table to the dimension. But in this case, it's very simple in that customer ID exists in both tables and product ID exists in both tables. So that's it. I've added my dimensions to my stage table. WhereScape's figuring out how to do the joins already. I can go here. I can rebuild my update procedure. I'll just click OK. I've modified the table. I added some columns, so I'll need to recreate the table. Once I've done that, it should only take a second, I can run my update script to populate the stage table from 4 source tables: load orders, load order details, dim customers, and dim product. And now if I look at the data, I can see that my stage table has everything I need in it. It's got the customer surrogate key, it's got the product surrogate key, those are joined automatically, it's got the header information, the detailed information. Everything's ready to go, and now I'm ready to create my fact table. So fact table is easy because everything's already done in the stage table. I can just set my context to fact tables. I don't have any yet. Refresh my data warehouse. Here is my stage table, and I'll just drag over this new stage table we just created that's got everything in it. Again, naming conventions are followed. I don't quite want to build this yet, again, because there's one more thing I want to do. Technically, what I want to do is remove the customer ID because we're joining to the dimension through the surrogate key, and Kimball says I should get rid of that. And then the product ID as well. I want to get rid of that because I don't need the business key on the fact table. I'm joining through the surrogate key. All right, got that done. I can now build my update script for updating my fact from my stage table. And then once I've got that done, I can create my stage table. WhereScape will generate all the DDL. And then once I've got that done, I can execute my update script, populate this fact table, and right like that, I've now got a fully functional fact table joined to 2 dimensions. And if I were using some BI analytics tool, Tableau, Power BI, Looker, whatever it was, if I were working with a data analyst, they could now connect to my data warehouse and start browsing this data, running reports, give me immediate feedback. Maybe there's other transforms I need to add. I've got all that available at my fingertips. We've got our facts and dimensions created. I want to show you 2 other things I can do with this. I've got a trackback diagram. I can very quickly see at a table level, at a column level, where all my data came from. Anytime they're presenting new data, a data analyst has a new dashboard, a new report. The question always comes up, do you trust this data? Where do these numbers come from? With WhereScape, because if we have all this metadata, I can go back and see source systems it came from, how my data was combined, calculated columns, things like that. The other thing I can do is I can create documentation. I need to tell it where I want to create it. It's created as an HTML file. I have a few options on how I want to create it. But once it's created, I can bring it up in a browser. Again, this is an HTML file. I can put this on a shared drive, and immediately everyone has access to this documentation I just created. It's got a glossary of all the elements of my data warehouse, including everything I created on these new dimensions and new facts. All these are in here. And then for all the objects I've got information about the objects, the documentation I typed in. I've got trackback diagrams here as well. And it tells me that this dimension is joined to a fact table. I can go look at the fact table, and I can see all the information about it, including the Star Schema, trackback diagrams, and stuff like that. So the documentation is a huge, huge, huge feature. With a couple clicks, or even through an automated process, I can have up-to-date current documentation every morning in my dev environment, in my QA environment, in my production environment.